where sustainability within fashion is headed, we believe firmly or strongly, is end-of-life management and responsibility for material and end-of-life.
Welcome back to Responsible Impact, the show where we discuss all things sustainability and e-commerce. The impetus of this show, this podcast, is the recognition that as players in e-commerce, MagicLinks is standing in the same room as many other actors with considerable collective impact on the environment. The way we all consider sustainability in the aggregate, and then the way we specifically own our respective movements towards sustainability is crucial to actually moving the needle towards good. I say this because the conversation with Chloe Songer and Stuart Allam, the founders of shoe company Thousandfell, was noteworthy in that it made eye contact with just about all the interwoven facets of sustainability. They too are looking all the way around the room, as it were. So this is a special two-part conversation, and I'm excited to present it to you. This is part one of our conversation with Thousandfell.
So I'm Chloe Songer.
I'm Stuart Allam.
And we're the co-founders of Thousandfell. We met 7 years ago in China. I was living in Wuhan. Stuart was living in Shanghai. Previous to that, he was living in Thailand. We did the same postgrad program in Asia. And then lived and worked in Shanghai at the same time. And both of us kind of really early in our career got the chance to spend time in and out of factories and close to the means of sourcing and production, and kind of started our career, near consumer brands.
Spent a lot of time in between Shanghai, Dongguan, and Fujian, working in footwear factories and setting up sample rooms and sourcing and full scale production. And so leveraged a lot of that when launching Thousandfell. And Chloe kind of framed up something pretty nicely, but early in our careers, we saw how the manufacturing process was run. And so when thinking about the changes that we wanted to make within larger retail, having that background and that understanding has allowed us to really tackle this mission of ending textile waste and doing it through circular retail and closed loop systems. So that's us. That's kind of our genesis.
Yeah.
That's where we met, and that's how we started the company.
You mentioned being in Wuhan. So was all of this with COVID? Was that particularly? I mean, you must know people who were there.
Yeah, It was this year has been absolutely insane. Around Christmas time. So yes, I spent a year in Wuhan. I actually worked at the Wuhan University of Technology, which has been embroiled in some of the drama with the COVID virus and research. And it's an amazing city. And Stuart and I both, we spent 3 years in China, and we love, Chinese people and Chinese culture. And it was interesting. I had left 5 years ago, maybe, China, and nobody ever asked me about Wuhan until this year. I'm like the local expert. But I have really, really.
And here I am doing it too.
I know, but and I absolutely loved my time in Wuhan, and I had really close friends, one in particular who I would consider a life best friend, because Wuhan was not an international city at all while I was there. And I had a tight-knit group of international or expat friends, but I really was pushed to join a local community and to make, awesome local friends, and it helped that I spoke the language. But it's an incredible city with an incredible group of people, and it has been really tough to see what happened to them earlier this year.
So I saw that you guys had worked with GAP's rotational management program. Were there any sort of takeaways from that informed what you're doing now, or was it mostly your experiences in China, or was that all, talk to me about that?
Totally. So I actually did the management program, but Stuart and I, to back up, we are now dating, and we were together during that time, and we were also working together on a couple of side projects during that. But maybe we should just dive in and tell you the full story.
Let's do it.
Yes. So we met. So I was living in Wuhan. We both did Princeton in Asia. Stu was in Northern Thailand. We both wanted to figure out retail, consumer, and extend time in Asia. And so we both moved to Shanghai. And in Shanghai, I was working for Alexander Wang Group on an awesome new brand called Arate Studio. And it was a small team launching a made in China, designed in China luxury label, which was fantastic because I got to be really early on in a kind of luxury fashion business and see everything from sourcing, supply chain, sales, marketing, fashion week. and really got to be on the biz dev side of a retail business, and realize that that's what I wanted to do. And I'll kind of let Stu come in and fill in his part. But what I did from there is I had a mentor tell me, well, I was super interested in sustainability based on my background growing up in California and environmental activism, environmental policy that I'd been involved with before. And a mentor of mine told me, if you want to change the fashion industry, you need to learn how to move units, and you need to learn how to build a big business that can affect more people. And I never imagined that. I was so interested in high fashion, I never imagined that I would go to Gap. But Gap has a fantastic management training program. If you're trying to enter the retail industry, I would highly recommend looking for a training program at a big business, because you'll learn best practices and you'll understand really on a macro level how to think businesses across markets and across kind of skill sets and business functions within the corporation. And while I was there, Gap had launched in San Francisco. Gap had launched Aero. This was about 2015, 2016, which was their innovation lab, and they'd poached the head of innovation from Patagonia, and he was awesome. And they were doing token investments into awesome biofabrication and cellular agriculture companies, so Bolt Threads, Modern Meadow. And it blew my mind, like lab-grown leather, lab-grown spider silk, like what the future of retail and fashion could be if you didn't have to rely on cotton fields that use so much water, or on, animals for leather and tanneries. And so at that time, and Stuart will jump in a minute and tell you his background, but he had access to supply chain sourcing and R&D facilities for footwear. And we started just looking into new materials and testing different things. And as a passion project, we joined Materiaux in Paris and Material Connection in New York, and started just testing mushroom leather, apple leather, cork, like trying to make sandals and shoes and sneakers out of so many different types of things. And so this started with a kind of a obsession or a fascination with, new material innovation. And as we got deeper into this journey, we ended up meeting an advisor of ours from the recycling space, and starting to think full picture holistically about the progression of sustainability within fashion, and where sustainability within fashion is headed. We believe firmly or strongly is end-of-life management and responsibility for material and end-of-life. So we've kind of flipped with Thousand Fell. Our mission is now how to end textile waste, and really using that material innovation to design for recycling. But now fill in how you have to bring the big expertise.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but as Chloe framed up, spent time in Asia, was in Shanghai, and started actually my career helping international consumer brands enter into the China market. And so worked really closely with brands like SK2 and Skull Candy as they looked at the China consumer and how they were shopping differently. And it was mobile first, which was like so revolutionary, 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of come full circle here too. But, seeing all of those best practices and really being interested in consumer. And then at the same time, there's at least when I was there, a really robust entrepreneurship scene in Shanghai. And so got really involved with a couple of guys that were launching footwear direct to consumer, and spent a lot of time down in Dongguan as they were manufacturing product, and helped them launch it in the US. And we sold predominantly wholesale, but into retailers like Nordstrom's and Saks and Eastain and Stitch Fix, and learned a ton about the footwear space and the footwear consumer, and this price point product category that people were buying, 2 to 4 times a year, and just kind of burning through these 10,000 step a day basic sneakers. And so really interested in changing the way that people were consuming and putting product on a closed loop. And so, it's really tough to donate footwear. It's really tough to resell footwear. And there's some great companies that are in the high end resale market, StockX and Goat and Stadium Goods. But for your everyday shoe, it's really hard. And so the solution that we found was putting that on a loop and making sure that we could recapture product, that we could break it down into its component parts and do fiber recapture and do like for like recycling, so that where we're putting fabric and fibers back into new shoes. And so we've built that full system here, and it really was informed again by consumer behavior in early days in the footwear space and how footwear was manufactured. And then, as Chloe mentioned, the early partnerships that we've had with some really great mentors of ours in the waste management and recycling space.
I mean, you guys are probably the only footwear company that I've seen, and granted, I'm not an expert, but that I've seen who discuss breaking it down into its component parts.
Yep.
Everybody else, like, it becomes just sort of a wholesale, like, the sum is greater than its parts things, and then, like, it's like, oh nope, that's one complete shoe, you can't take it apart, and nothing about that can be reused. I think that's really revolutionary. I mean, are you aware of anybody else who's approaching it from that mindset?
I think it's definitely something that the industry at large is moving towards, and you're seeing it with Ellen MacArthur Foundation and with the UN sustainability goals and the Global Fashion Pact that everyone signed in France last year. Circularity is a big tenet of the industry's solution towards sustainability go forward. I just think those time horizons are 10 to 15 years out, and you're seeing larger brands like Adidas launch pilot programs, and you're seeing Nike doing early take back programs for their regrind, but it's not at scale. It's not an entire industry shifts yet, and I think it's hard with larger supply chains to do that. And then I think where we're headed and kind of the next challenge for us is that take back or recapture is one thing, and being able to send a shoe back is one thing, but actually being able to recycle it and showing customers what that product journey looks like is kind of a new frontier, and so really are leading in that space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the difference we see, and it's a big focus for us over the next year, will be like consumer education and customer education and market development on what does recyclable mean.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's many different versions, you can call something recyclable technically, but then take it back and do what a lot of businesses do, where you burn the product and waste to energy.
Yep.
Or you can take it back and you can maybe downcycle part of it, like just take the rubber and downcycle it into like tracks or construction projects,
Mm-hmm.
and then burn the pieces that you can't pull apart or recycle, or that were compromised by adhesives or cement. Because footwear is really complex. You're taking 100 odd parts. I actually forget the number and the average number of parts in a shoe, but you're taking 100 odd parts and you're cementing or gluing or heat fusing them together, melting them together. And the problem with recycling is you need clean material feeds, and you need tonnage waste in those feeds to hit profitability at scale. And so it's really a design thinking exercise. How do you redesign products to be able to easily pull apart, to have as few material feeds as possible, to have adhesives and attachment points that don't impact recycling, and then how do you take back that product at end of life and incentivize both consumers and brands to try to collect back that product, and then how do you put that old fiber back into new product? So it's a whole new system that we're piloting and looking at building. I think we have like a fantastic Gen 1 shoe, and we're the only shoe like this that we know of on the market or in development.
Being able to break things down on the back end of influences where you source them from in the first place. You've got some really great things like palm leaves. You've got like aloe, different rubbers. I saw you have quartz involved in your shoes. Can you speak to sourcing for your components?
Yeah, so it's a couple different stakeholders, and we have a couple different factors that we consider when sourcing. And so the number one, first and foremost, is can it be recycled? And oftentimes what that means is that are there no blends? So it's really hard from a mechanical recycling point of view to blend or to recycle blended like cotton poly or like spandex and nylon. Like it gets really tough to pull those individual fiber feeds apart. So we've focused on making sure that we're sourcing things that are like 100% rPET, rubber, 100% cotton, and making sure that we can actually recapture that and then mechanically recycle it. The other considerations is that we really want to make sure that we're reducing any and all like virgin materials that are going into it. So if we're using rPET, making sure that it's recycled. If we're using cotton, making sure that it's organic, and if not organic, then making sure that it's recycled as well. Making sure that the component parts that we're using, we're swapping out virgin plastics for industrial food waste that we can compost, which is huge for us. And so there's certain things too that impede recycling, and there's a reason why we do aloe vera as opposed to like metals like silver and copper that a lot of people use for antimicrobial or for anti-smell, and it's like really hard to recycle those metals. And so we've done natural coatings on there that doesn't impede recycling, but at the same time also keeps our carbon footprint low on the beginning of the supply chain, right? And so being really focused on renewables, being really focused on recyclables, and then and then making sure that those feeds can be circular. So what's really great about RPET for footwear in particular is that we don't recommend that you wash our shoes. Don't do that. Microplastic pollution is a real thing, and
Yes.
and so it sheds, which is not good. But
Yes.
you don't wash ours. But what's nice is that you can turn our PET like 20 plus times. And so we can recapture that, we can grind it back down, we can get our PET fibers, and then we can reintegrate that back into our supply chain at the yarn level and in the textile level, which is so valuable. And the same thing with rubber, we can recycle it and recapture it into crumb rubber and put it back in. And so we've been really thoughtful, to target these material feeds that are already kind of at scale from a recycling point of view. It's the rubber, and you can imagine the car tire industry recycling rubber, PET with plastic bottles, cotton with early fiber and clothing recycling. And so being able to work into these feeds is really important, and then making sure that we're sourcing the best. And so one, like, our rubber supplier is unbelievable. It's a company called Ulex. They do all of the rubber supplying for Patagonia's wetsuits, and wetsuits are notoriously harmful and have heavy environmental impact. And the Ulex team is unbelievable. They're like carbon neutral. And the rubber is just incredible. So be making sure that we're working with some of the best in class partners. The thing that we noticed was that, a lot of these mills are really interested in innovating and changing. And so there's been a early push to do R&D and material testing and development into recyclable and into sustainable materials. I mean, it's what the industry is demanding. And so we've been able to find some really great partners that have started early on doing that research. The tricky thing is that, and Chloe alluded to this, is that footwear is such a technical process, and it's really intensive. So you're like stretching things over lasts, and you're stitching them, and there's a lot of tension, and then you're putting them in and out of heating and cooling chambers. And so, like, the material has to be really durable. And so that's a whole nother R&D process that we had to go through in order to source these. But the sourcing part of the business is really tough. And I think what was nice is we were able to leverage our industry experience in order to achieve that.
Yeah, this actually broaches a question. So, of all of the things that you could have started out making with these wonderful values in mind, it sounds like footwear was maybe one of the more difficult ones to achieve.
Yes.
Why footwear versus something else? And then also, why the sneaker versus other kinds of shoes?
Yeah, I can jump in and talk about why footwear. I think you're absolutely right. So footwear is by far the hardest product category in retail to manufacture, and it translates equally as difficult to recycle. And I think what's so interesting about it is that we wanted to come in and make real change. And the challenge was, how do we do the most difficult product category, and at the same time, how do we do a product category that probably has the most impact on waste? And so 17% of landfill waste is textile waste. Footwear is disproportionately wasteful. It accounts for 1/10 of production, but 1/4 of all waste. And so it's a big problem in the industry.
That's nauseating. Okay.
Yeah, I know. And it's so hard. It's so hard to recycle, and it's so hard to donate it. And so it goes straight to landfill. And the other thing there too is that it's a 10,000 step a day shoe now. I mean, this is what everybody's wearing. They're wearing it to work. They're wearing it on the weekends. And we're seeing people buy upwards of 8 to 10 pairs of shoes a year in the US. And really the sneaker category, and we liken it to an intimate, like lingerie, that people are kind of burning through, and there's no good aftermarket. And so it's really the perfect product to put on a closed loop. And I can let Chloe kind of jump in and talk a little bit more about it.
I was just going to say, when you hear the numbers, it's staggering, but 2.4 billion pairs of shoes are sold in the US every year. So that's 8 per American. And in this product category, the first user is the last user. It's really hard in textiles in general to actually donate. You can't donate forever. So It's one of the reasons that there are, textile wastelands in developing countries. And at some point, we have to be accountable for our own waste, and we can't continue to ship it off. And footwear is uniquely hard to donate because And that's why Stuart just mentioned we liken it to intimates or lingerie. But if a shoe smells even slightly on the inside, it's a sign of bacteria. Or if the back heel is worn down, it'll affect the second user's gait. So there are a lot of things that have to be right in a shoe in order for it to legally be able to be donated. And generally, particularly with sneakers, like these are daily wear products that you're tearing through that are brown, smelly, whatever. And the average consumer is buying 2 to 3 pairs a year. And they really have an 8 to 12 month lifespan if you're wearing them frequently. So that's why so many more shoes are going to landfill versus, coats or handbags or things that you can make last and keep in your closet for 5 to 10 years. Sneakers are a fairly consistent repeat purchase and the perfect product category to start to tackle. And the other kind of problem there is from the environmental side. It's really easy to switch your t-shirt supply chain line from like a cotton poly blend to organic cotton or US based cotton. That's a really easy supply chain swap. But when you look at the main component parts in footwear, it's rubber, plastic, and leather. And those are 3 of the worst offenders when you look at kind of the Higg material index. Leather is the single worst material in the fashion industry from a carbon, energy, and water point of view and land use point of view. And that's everything from the land use used to raise the cattle to the deforestation kind of linkage, as well as the tanning process. And I think Stuart mentioned this, but the chemicals that go into tanning, chromium is a well-known carcinogen. And it's, the tanning process has a high impact both on the workers and the land around the tannery.
Mm-hmm.
And then post-life or afterlife, you might think leather is natural or biodegradable because it's, skin. But once you've tanned something, you've mummified it. And leather can take 80 to 100 years to break down in a landfill. And then rubber and plastic can take up to 1,000 years to break down. And they contribute to, again, then heavy metal runoff and microplastic pollution from leachate or landfill runoff. So there's a lot of problems with the component parts in footwear as well. So if you're going to try to make a big difference, you might as well start with the most wasteful product category, and then it'll be easy to like tack on hoodies, t-shirts, socks, whatever you want later. But this is, if we're actually interested in making a difference and not interested in having an easy business model out the gate, this was, where we needed to start.
I have profound respect for you both for basically saying that you wanted this specific thing because it was the hardest. I'm talking to you though, of course, after you're off and running. I mean, your shoes are very successful. Everybody seems to love them. Your site is beautiful. You have your supply chains up and running. I have to imagine that when you were staring down the barrel of making a choice or picking an easier route at the beginning and perhaps looking for backing, that was maybe a little bit of a different feeling. Was that a difficult process for you? Are you comfortable speaking to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, every single time we talk to a prospective partner or investor, we get asked why sneakers.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was being original-ish.
No, and especially even like, it's a big, well, especially because the sustainable footwear space has ballooned in the past 2 years and it's fairly crowded. And there's so many brands claiming to be sustainable footwear. And especially when you think about it from kind of an investment point of view, people want to invest in like the leader or a market leader or a white space. And, there's this argument that like the footwear will never be a winner takes all market. It's a huge, massive global industry and it's not going anywhere. We're always going to need shoes. There might be different trends or the style trends that come and go, but like footwear in general will be there. And we've only barely scratched the surface of the percentage of footwear made globally that is actually truly sustainable. And then that's on top of that recyclable. So there can be many winners in sustainable recyclable footwear in our mind. But then it was also much easier because we had, from working, especially with Stuart's background in footwear, we had already really deep connections within footwear supply chain and sourcing. And our biggest advantage early on was, we were, fairly young in our career, but we were able to bring together an awesome team of industry experts from Keds and Cole Haan and Nike to help us build this. And so, I don't think it would have been as compelling in any other product category. Do you want to answer?
Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, do you want to add?
Yeah, I love our team. I can't say enough good things about it. And I think it's so interesting. And anybody listening that's like an old shoe dog will recognize this and laugh at this. But like, it's kind of this really tight-knit community. It's like everybody knows everybody in footwear. There's only a couple big players. Everybody's either worked at like Nike, Adidas, Cole Haan, and New Balance, and like Converse and Keds. And so it's just really interesting to like tap into that. And to be honest with you, I know Chloe mentioned in the past couple of years, people have been talking about sustainable footwear, and that's a good thing. And I'm really thankful for that. But man, it is an industry that has not really undergone a lot of innovation in the past like 100 years, right? Like everybody still has their Chuck Taylor All Stars that look the same as it did in 1920. Like that's crazy. And so it's really ripe for disruption. And what's so interesting when we went out to talk about our vision, it's like the people that work in the space and know the space intimately and very well loved the idea because it's something that I think everybody had been whispering and talking about for a long time on how to do it. And it really is the new frontier for production and for the way that like companies and brands should be operating. And so I think that was a comforting and a big and important win for us early on, was getting people that were experts bought into the vision and the mission. And it's really funny that you mentioned like how daunting it was early on. I think I'm going to say two things. One, I think if I knew everything that I knew today when I first started, I would have been way more intimidated. So like ignorance is a little blissful, so, which is good, right? So we were like kind of blindly optimistic, like, oh yeah, we can totally do this, and didn't even understand half of the things that we'd have to do. So
well, I mean, it worked out. So
yeah, so I'm gonna credit a little bit of like dumb luck there. I also think what's nice and what we've started doing as founders is hind-sighting and doing it on a quarterly basis and starting a little bit more frequently to do it on a monthly basis to really see how the business has grown and the milestones that we've hit. And I think it gets really easy for any founder in any company and any startup at all to like lose sight of the progress that you've made. And it's like you're so busy doing 1,000,001 different things and putting out a ton of small fires and like operating the business and like the daily operational tasks that it requires that you lose sight of like a lot of the progress that you've made. And so we've really started celebrating those milestones. And it's been nice to look back and go like, man, like this goal a year ago was to kind of be where we are right now. And it's like amazing that we've done that. And like, look how far we've come. But in the middle of like a hectic Thursday, I feel like what sort of progress have you made? I don't know. I might be like less, not optimistic, but like less clear-minded about it. So it's good to have that point of reflection.
I think you saying that is a really fascinating, almost like a philosophical difference. And it's formed a little hypothesis in my brain, so I'm going to spit it out and you can tell me if I'm on the right track. I think a lot of people, particularly in a very competitive field, whatever it might be, fashion, footwear or not, in order to feel like you're going to survive, that competitive nature means that you're trying to look as far into the future as you can. And what you're describing is a nice balance where you have some retrospectives. And I think that might inform the sense of mission and really of verified place, right? Like you're very self-reflective as a company. And so your product is self-reflective and it knows where it wants to stand in history because you're also looking at history. Am I misconstruing or like taking it out of context?
No, I think that's beautiful. I think there's we've spent, I would say a couple of things. One, I think something we know about ourselves, and especially know now in light of COVID and what we've been through the past 4 months, is that we as founders, a superpower of ours is definitely that we're thoughtful. I think we have put a lot of ourselves into this business, and especially because we spent so many years building it on our own before even taking outside investment, we have a tendency to plan and think and really want to share. And so I think I would definitely say you're correct and right on that is feedback that we get really often. But then the retrospective piece, looking back versus looking forward, it's so interesting you call that out because there is this push and pull. And I think that's actually something between Stuart and I. We spent a lot of time thinking about even who we are as founders and the difference between the two of us. And I have to hindsight, but my background was also in a retail business, where we spent the majority of my job was hind-sighting sales, quarterly, monthly, weekly. weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, and looking and really, really tied to year over year growth and knowing what happened and where we needed to go. And so I'm, really focused on where have we been, what are we trying to do, and I'll let you explain your take.
Yeah. I am doing a better job looking back, but I shoot from the hip so much and just try to get shit done. It can be super. Listen. I have
no, but both are important.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've come to realize and done a better job realizing when we need to do that, and pushing us to do that, and then when we need to like maybe collect our thoughts a little bit. And gather our troops.
There's this need to like build, go, go.
Yeah.
And you can't do too much of one or the other. Like you just can't. Like we can't be so tied to the past that we're afraid to act and that we're handcuffing ourselves. But we can't just like keep pushing without thinking about and like coming back to the basics, mission, vision, why. Like why are we doing this? Like let's reset. Like and especially when you're tied to things that move so quickly, like social content is going out every day and we're testing TikTok or this, that, and the other, and like things are now moving so much faster than I think we could have ever imagined. And it's really, really important that we continue to come back and like zoom out and look at both hind-sighting and then future plans.
The other thing I'll say too is if you hindsight regularly, what I'm realizing is it allows you to act quicker because you have more confidence in what you're doing. And so like a really good example of this was the social justice movement when it hit and how we responded to it. And I think I look back at the business and I think I'm the most proud of that in the past year.
Really?
And it took us a much longer to figure out how we were going to respond to COVID, by several days. But we really had to think about what it meant to be a business. And we knew that, starting with COVID, we knew early on where we stood when it came to sustainability and to like environmental activism and environmental justice. Like we had that ironed out and hammered out. And if anybody was like, what do you think about this mission? What do you think about, these initiatives around environmentalism? We totally knew where the brand stood and how to speak to it. What we didn't know how to talk about was like virology and epidemiology and global pandemics and how that impacted people. And we didn't know how to really talk about mass like social injustice and racial injustice and like what that meant to the brand and how the brand spoke about it. And I think we were able to really, when COVID hit, we were able to think about what sort of business we wanted to build and how mission driven we wanted to be around this idea of building a better tomorrow and treating people like people. And that being really central to Chloe and I and to the business that we were building and the teams that we were working with, that when the social justice movement was really just starting, we were able to really quickly think about and know how we wanted to respond and understand, I think really quickly, how social justice is inextricably linked to environmental justice and vice versa. And to bring a community around that and amplify voices that were experts in that where we might not have been experts, but use kind of our platform to talk about that. And so I think all of that came from being really clear on the community that we were building, the mission that we had around building a better tomorrow, and having hindsighted that and being thoughtful about that as COVID spiked, and then being able to see kind of similarities with that need to really be authentic and respond to the social justice movement.
I mean, we had something similar within MagicLinks. Like we were like, yeah, no question, this is the right thing to be doing, and this is, it's unacceptable that people are treated this way. But you bring up a good point that there are a lot of companies that really stumbled. I mean, I watched a number of organizations that I know. Some of them just outright dropped the ball, and it was a little bit like, why did you need to take time to think about this? But you tying that together to like, being able to act quickly when the time comes because you're prepared. I think that's an excellent point. We put out a blog post as a company when all of this was going on saying civil rights or human rights. There was a human rights professor who mentioned, it's so strange to me that they call it civil rights in the United States because everywhere else in the world, it's human rights.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, and so it's almost like, and I don't know if it was intentional, and a lot of racism in America, of course, was very calculating and cruel. But to call it civil rights makes it feel like it's something that the government needs to grant you. and that you need to maybe codify on a piece of paper, it doesn't feel like it's something endemic to you by virtue of being a human being.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really well said.
And it changes it so that it sounds like people are asking for more of their government instead of what their government is overdue and, remiss for not already having provided and secured. Now, whenever I can and people talk about civil rights, I'm like, oh, it's human rights. It's a human rights issue.
Totally.
I think that's really well said.
Yeah, and the link there even, and this is what Stuart was trying to express, that was when we sat with our team, and our team is very young and very diverse, to talk about how we were going to respond, and also just like, how is this affecting our team?
Yeah.
It's so linked because climate change and environmental justice isn't a political issue, in my opinion. It's a human rights issue.
Yes.
And so is social justice and equality, and climate change and climate problems, and even landfill waste and landfill runoff and textile waste disproportionately affect lower income communities and affect your quality of life and your health. And that's a human rights issue.
Yeah.
And so it's just a really natural fit for us and for our community to lean into and to talk about, and something we're going to continue to work into kind of our brand DNA, and as a core mission for us.
We thought it was so foolish to have a shoebox inside of another box to ship it to you. It's like, they're already in a box. Can we just give it to you like that?
Welcome back to Responsible Impact, a production of MagicLinks. We connect influencers and brands in e-commerce, and so this is the show where we talk about how sustainability plays into all those things. This episode is part 2 of our conversation with Chloe Songer and Stuart Allam, the founders of shoe company Thousand Fell. You could jump right in, although I recommend backing up a couple of episodes to part 1 if you haven't heard it already. That said, if you're ready, let's talk packaging. You guys have this really great packaging. If you want to describe that for folks who maybe haven't heard it before.
Go for it, Stu.
I love it. I think it's a good Gen 1. I'm excited to kind of continue to tweak and make updates. The number one thing that we did and had to do early on, which took a ton of negotiation with our factory, because let me back up. What's hard with production is that the factory is taking like a risk on these footwear that they're manufacturing, or any product, and when they ship it to you, they don't want it to get damaged. And so there's a reason why there's so much tissue paper and plastic and like padding and like dunnage in all of these packaging that you usually get, because they want to make sure that the product is protected and that there's no liability. And so it was a big back and forth to get our factory to take out all plastic and all tissue paper from the packaging. And the other thing that we wanted to do is, we thought it was, and other companies are thinking through this too, and I applaud them as well. So we're not 100% novel on this, but we thought it was so foolish to have a shoebox inside of another box to ship it to you. It's like, they're already in a box. Can we just give it to you like that? So we were really focused on doing a single shipper, and we wanted to make sure that the sizing was consistent, and so that a size 12 men's would fit in the same one as a size 8, and that we didn't need extra padding, and that everything could easily be curb recyclable, and that we didn't have a lot of extra waste. And so we work with a fantastic supplier down in Brazil, which is where we manufacture, so that the packaging production is really close to the factory, so there's not a lot of shipping. It's all FSC certified. They're carbon neutral. They trace where all of their pulp comes from. A lot of it is recycled post-industrially, which is great. And then we work really closely on our tape and our packaging too, where everything can be curb recycled. So you can just take it as is and bring it to the bin, and it'll be taken care of at the municipal level. And what we've done is we've put the shoes inside of an organic cotton dust bag, and we actually work with a really great organization down in Brazil that works with at-risk women in the favelas to do a lot of the stitching and sewing. And so we've been really focused on making sure that we're sourcing this packaging responsibly, and that we're cutting down on all the extra waste that we don't need, so that when the item does finally arrive to you, it's still in great condition, it's still protected, but we're replacing a lot of the unnecessary dunnage and unnecessary packaging material, and then also giving you like a cool dust bag and cool like shoulder bag to carry around too. which is always nice.
Whose idea was that, or what was the evolution of that packaging? Because I'm sure you probably didn't start out with that vision, or did you?
So we knew that we wanted to cut back on a lot of stuff. We did a ton of research into what we should do, and we did a ton of research into should it be like a durable where it's like recycled nylon that then people can keep, and then they can, when they're done recycling the shoes, they can send it back to us. And like then the thought process was, wow, is someone actually going to keep that and not lose it in like the 8 to 12 months when they own the shoe? Like maybe not. Maybe that's asking too much. And then we worked really closely with our tech designer, and he was like, "I've got this. I've been wanting to do this forever. Like, leave it to me." And he built this beautiful. It's now like bright cobalt blue wardrober that opens up almost like a clamshell, and then has like this beautiful sort of like wardrobe opening effect that can secure the shoes in place regardless of size. But then really reduce the amount of corrugate that's being used. So it's lovely, and we're constantly iterating on it. But I think it's a really good Gen 1, and it's really fun and bright and exciting, and we're able to print information on it so that we don't have to add additional paper for digital or for paper invoices and packing slips.
We talked at the top of the show a lot about like sourcing products and finding out things that worked for you. As you were bringing your components together and building the first versions of the shoe before you went to market with it, what was that process like?
Yeah, do you want me to jump in and
No,
talk
keep
about this?
going. Stuart does all the way we split roles. Stu does all supply chain and sourcing, and I'm on like the marketing and brand side.
It's
So
my time to shine.
it's his time.
Do it. Do it.
So, so material testing is really tough, and what's nice though is that there are some really great requirements within the textile landscape for like ISO certifications to make sure that things are actually sustainable, to make sure that there's Satra testing to make sure that they are durable, that they won't fray, and durability is a big part of sustainability, right? So something's not sustainable if you can only use it like 3 times and it disintegrates into nothing, or you have to throw it away. So we really wanted to make sure that it was durable, and so we had to go through a ton of durability testing. And so we a non-starter for us was that it didn't pass certain durability requirements at the fiber or at the textile level. And so once we kind of got to that point, it's now, once you put all these materials together, are they still durable? And I mentioned this a little earlier, but footwear is so intensive. There's stretching and lasting, and you're adhering a bunch of stuff together, and you're stitching it, and you're going through heating and cooling chambers. And so it's really easy for materials to get damaged or rip or tear during that process. And then once they actually are all put together, if they're successfully put together, you've got this really flexible product that's like flexing millions and millions and millions of times, and the tongue is being pulled really hard, and you're tugging really hard on your laces, and so there's just a lot of wear and tear. And so we ended up going through 8 or 9 different iterations of our upper material to make sure that it was durable enough, to make sure that it passed the standard wear test of 8+ months of wear, 10,000 steps a day, that make sure that, and there's peel tests and adhesion tests, so that it passed all of those things and was up to standards. And so if our factory partner is listening, thank you for bearing with us during all of those different iterations. Man, I remember a few times during that process, they were like, "Hey guys, like, listen, I've got this other material that's really great. It's leather. You guys could use that instead." If we were like, "No, that defeats the purpose." But I understand the frustration of going through all the testing, and so that was a big challenge of ours. And really happy with where the Gen 1 product landed, and with how it performs. And so a lot of our marketing messaging is around like how durable it is. And then some other things that were really important to us too is that we knew that this product category was going to be worn in pretty intense environments. Like, it was going to be walking all over the city. It was going to be worn in the rain. It was going to be worn when everybody was still going out to dive bars and to concerts and music festivals. So like, we wanted to make sure that it was stain proof and water resistant. And so that was the quartz liner or coating that we put on it. And that was really important to us, right? So like, we're selling white tennis shoes. What if they get brown really quickly? Like, how do we make sure that they stay new and they stay clean? And so these were all things that we sort of thought through and was part of the testing process, and a lot of iteration, and a couple of years of really working into that.
So you said like 8 or 9 versions, basically?
Yeah, they were all different backings, all
Yeah.
different coatings. We tried it with cotton at one
We
point.
really initially wanted it to be as bio-based as possible. And so we were focusing on cotton backings or bio-based backings. We ended up landing with recycled polyester. So there's no virgin plastic in the shoe. It's all recycled. But, you're trying to balance so many different design requirements. And we couldn't get strength up to standard with cotton backing. The coating kept peeling off, the adhesives weren't sticking, and the shoe would have fallen apart within 2 or 3 months of wear, and that's not sustainable.
Nope.
If you can't like keep your shoe for a year of like 8 to 12 months of heavy wear, and so we're trying to increase durability and we were focused on durability, comfort, aesthetic, and price. So there were
Yeah.
like so many different kind of restraints with like costs of the inputs and costs of the materials, like the supply chain where things were located, where they were sourcing fibers from. And so we netted with recycled poly. And, for us, the big issue there is microplastic pollution. But we don't recommend that you ever put shoes in the washer because even rubber contributes to microplastic pollution. So we recommend like cleaning with like a white cloth. But yeah, 8 different versions, I think, over time.
Yeah.
That must have been, I mean, at a certain point, were you guys looking at yourselves and saying like, okay, we need to keep going? And then, did you have to like put an inspirational quote on the wall or something? Like, I mean, I would have had to.
I remember the moment where I thought it was all gonna just like come crashing down, and
It was not a good moment.
I'll never forget this.
What happened?
So we go through a bunch of different testing with the shoe, and so we've already gone through a bunch of ones that just don't work, right? Like they peel apart when it goes through the heating and cooling chambers, or the outsoles keep getting pulled off with like very minimal force. And so we've gone through like 4 or 5, maybe 6 iterations at this point. And we're finally one that's like it's gone through the lasting process, it's gone through the heating and cooling, it's wearing really well. All of like the step tests are going really well, and they do a final peel test. And what they do is they take the shoe and they put it on a bandsaw and they cut it like straight down the middle. And so the shoe is like a hot dog, right? It just cut straight in half, and you can see it's like a cross section. You can see it totally through. And then they cut off the bottom of the outsole, right? So that like the stuff that touches the bottom. And so now it's just like you can see straight through the bottom of it too. And it's just where the outsole wall attaches to the upper. And they're doing a peel test to make sure that it won't pull apart, because that's where a lot of the wear test goes. And we failed the test, and it was devastating. And we were like, oh my God, we've gone through so many iterations. And we were like, and the factory's like, this might be the final straw. Like, this is crazy. We've done so much. Like, I can't believe it's gotten here. And so we finally ended up finding a new version. We got a new backing, and we're like, guys, we went to the mill and we're like, are you sure this one's strong? And they're like, yes, like this one's going to do it. Like, okay, let's give it a shot. And it passed. In fact, like it was so like, I went from total low basement, awful, this whole business is going to fail, to so pumped, top of the world, and we're really excited with the material and with how it's performed, and with the factory for sticking with us.
It feels like a Rocky theme song moment.
Yeah, seriously. Against the ropes.
I know that we've talked a lot about, obviously, one of my questions was, what do you most wish you could change about the industry today? But it sounds like, honestly, your entire business practice is a manifesto of what you want to see done differently. Is there anything that you haven't discussed that you would like to address that you wish the industry was doing differently beyond?
The thing we didn't frame up is we've talked a lot about waste.
Mm-hmm.
So we both believe that in the next 2 decades, our relationship as consumers with products will change.
Totally.
And it'll be outside of fashion and retail, but you'll be creating products that are, have value after their first use. But the other bigger thing that we're really focused on, and that's super important to Stuart and I, and it's actually after that moment, we've had so many moments like that where we're just like, why are we doing this? and Stuart said to me one day recently, I was like, what would we do if like Thousand Fell failed? Like, what would you want to go do next? And he was like, honestly, I'd probably want to do the same thing. Like, it might not be with shoes, it might not be, with a consumer facing brand, but the mission is the same. And the other mission that we have is really around the democratization of sustainability.
Yeah.
And so we like to say that we're trying to redefine sustainability for the next generation, because sustainability or sustainable climate change, like all these words have become such dirty words because they've been co-opted into branding campaigns,
Mm-hmm.
and because there's been so much shame associated with them.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about the zero waste movement, it's been held in this, more exclusive, upwardly mobile, college educated community that's generally coastal when we're just focusing on the US perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And then whether or not you can participate in a zero waste movement or a vegan eating movement, there's so much shame involved if you do something wrong or
Mm-hmm.
not quite right.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a real cancel culture involved with these behavior changes, and they're really large, big behavior changes, asking people to completely change the way that they eat or consume or think about waste and disposal within their day-to-day life. And so we're really focused on bringing both sustainable solutions, truly sustainable solutions, at a price point. So all of our next products will be at or below $100, and bringing kind of shame-free education, because especially with what we know about supply chain, a couple thousand people doing zero waste perfectly with like micro gardens in their kitchen, like it's inspiring and it's great, but it's not going to move the needle. We need bigger macro solutions that many people can easily and without fear participate in, to kind of to actually make a difference or to make a bigger impact. And so that's kind of, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think it's why we've built this brand world around optimism and building a better tomorrow, as opposed to being overly stringent on like zero waste and having to do it all right. Exactly. We're all on our own sustainability journey, right? And we're at different phases in that. And if you're fully vegan, and that's amazing, and congratulations, and I applaud people that do that. If you're just trying to cut meat for the first time, like I applaud that too. And I think that it's going to require people to be, to know kind of where the end goal is, and ultimately what we're after, but to kind of accept everybody that's on that journey with them. And I think that's a big part of it. And I think the other thing, and I alluded to it too, but and I think what it keeps circling around is our community and the people that we've brought together and around the brand, and that have bought into this mission and are early adopters and believe in it, and are not only customers but are like participating in sort of these panels and discussions that we're hosting, and are really engaged, and are really excited about the educational content that we're putting out, and are adding to that. And so I think that's really huge, and I think I'm really encouraged to see that. And I think what's the other thing that I'm excited to is, and Chloe alluded to this a little earlier, but this is definitely not a winner take all. I think we would fail if Thousand Fell was the only brand ever to do a closed loop recycling, and to be aiming to tackle waste. I want to see the industry at large do it. I think I think we're doing it the best, and that we're going to be leaders in it. I'm really excited and proud of that, and I think that's a big, that's a badge of honor for mine. But I really think that that's kind of the next step. And I know that it's pretty easy for fast fashion to be the punching bag, but there's some really smart people in a lot of these bigger companies that they're not unaware, and they're thinking about ways to kind of fix it and change it. And so, I'm interested in how, in partnerships that we can negotiate and set up to kind of bring that change, and to bring the system, and to bring the way that we're producing, and the way that we're recapturing product and recycling it at a really large scale. And so that's really important to us.
You both bring up really excellent points, and I did call out fast fashion earlier, and I feel like I should clarify. I 100% agree with the point that you just made about there being smart people with fast fashion. What I would love to see, and this is Natalie speaking as Natalie, right? But I suspect you guys might agree. I would love that intelligence that built these like cutthroat, just super lean, lithe supply
Yeah.
chains and distribute, like the ability to have that many seasons in a year and get them to store shelves that fast.
Super impressive.
Amazing. I love
Yeah,
that. We need, actually, frankly, we need those people to come and be able to put that innovation and that energy and spirit
100%.
towards sustainability and things that aren't going to leave our kids looking at us and going, "You did what now?"
Yeah,
You know? And I'm bummed because it's not that it doesn't exist. It's not that I'm asking for those kinds of things to be spun out of thin air. It's that I need them directed towards a goal that serves us all. And until that
100%.
happens, and until, as long as those systems continue to be sort of in service to shareholders, I'm gonna keep being like, no, come join us. We need you here. Sit with us.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I just what's so interesting, I don't know where I read this or I heard this. And I should probably go back to the source to make sure that I'm parroting it the right way. But um, fast fashion, the system's just broken, right? It's
Mhm.
like we have this resource scarcity and this, climate catastrophe that we're sort of hurtling towards. Um, and what we've done with the fast fashion system is we've just started sprinting faster towards the precipice. And it's like, it's insanity, right? It's like, hey, there's a waste problem. It's like, all right, I've got the solution. Let's make 10x the stuff and have it last
Yeah.
half as long, which is crazy, right? And so the system is just totally off and totally broken, and so I'm totally on board with you there. That's all just to say that, like, I think what's interesting about it is it's how do you then get this new system at scale
Yeah.
to the same number of people, and I think that's what I
Mhm.
think, and Chloe framed that up so nicely. That's what we're so interested in. It's like, how do you innovate sustainably, like cost effectively? Because there have been some really great companies that have started this sustainability movement, but man, is it price prohibitive,
Yeah.
and it's really hard to convince somebody that's focused and is impacted by their income and it really has to be budget conscious. It's like, spend $400 on shoes, like that's a lot
Yep.
of money.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I remember when we were before we had launched Thousand Fell, we were trying to go, and Chloe talks to this story, we were trying to go vegan, and we were trying to really change the way we were shopping. And we went to a sale, and it was like, man, I can't afford this like $450 shoe on
Yeah.
my salary. And so it was really important for us to deliver that um, at cost.
So, in talking about what you wish consumers could understand and know, obviously there's a lot of consumer education, and that's very much a marketing, item. What is it that you wish consumers could know about your stuff specifically, but then also just when they're out in the world shopping? As somebody who's so informed in this industry, what would you like to arm consumers with?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, and I don't have all the answers here. I think this is kind of our challenge for the next year, right? Is to figure out how does Thousand File actually, how do we actually create these consumer facing distinctions and actually help people understand what we're building and how it's different. And so, and we don't, it's a whole new set of language that we're going to need to normalize.
Mm-hmm.
But can you be recyclable? This goes back to the conversation we had earlier about, are there competitors? Can you be recyclable if you're collecting back and burning? Like, can you use the word recyclable?
Yeah.
Technically, that's, I guess, recycling, but it's not fiber recapture and creating new products out of old. And then there's downcycling versus upcycling, and it's, a ton of jargon. And then what does sustainability even mean, and how deep and how transparent should you or do you need to be with your supply chain in order to claim sustainable? And so we're working on a ton of different initiatives right now, working with some fantastic partners to actually build product level LCAs and have more insight, publicly available on our Gen 2 of our website on our supply chain, where we source and where materials come from. But then also we're doing a big launch this fall with our recycling partner about how we recycle and why that's so different, and how we're actually pulling apart the shoes, breaking down in component parts, generating new material feeds and putting back into the shoes. It's really hard when the majority of the way people find out about brands is like 8-second Instagram ads or Facebook ads. And if you're just flashing the word recyclable and there's like 4 other brands also flashing the word recyclable, how do you as the consumer know what you should actually look for, what's real and what's not?
Yes.
And so, we're testing new words like, um, you know, circular, closed loop. But what does circular economy mean? People don't quite know yet. It also has the word economy in that. That can be off-putting.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to spend time, really building brand equity around kind of a new set of language, and that's a goal for us this year to show how different what we're doing really is. And then the thing I would say, the second part of your question is, what should consumers know when they go shopping? We constantly get asked, like, well, how can I have a sustainable wardrobe? And the number one thing that I've learned in the past kind of 4 or 5 years is, and we spoke about it through our own journey, but it starts with material, because the material you choose, funds or, supports a supply chain and then has an impact on what happens to that garment end of life. And so I've committed to looking in my wardrobe. Two things: material, and then are you buying new or used?
Mm-hmm.
The easiest thing to do, actually, and especially as Stuart was mentioning, we were on a definite tight budget in our early 20s on like fashion salaries. The easiest thing to do is to buy used. So for anything we want that's designer, that might be leather, we are both really deep in buying secondhand, the real Poshmark, ThreadUp. These are
Mm-hmm.
fantastic Depop places to look for vintage and secondhand. And that's one of the easiest ways you can cut down on your own carbon footprint. The next thing you can do is start to understand, when you are buying new, what materials are you buying? Don't buy blends and don't buy synthetics unless they have recycled inputs. So, and then think about the kind of life cycle of your garment. So if it's a product that you're going to wash frequently, but it's made with polyester or recycled polyester, let's say it's like a yoga pant and it's recycled inputs made of plastic bottles, but you're going to wash it frequently, it's going to contribute to microplastic pollution. So we've installed a guppy on our washer, which can help filter out the microplastic pollution. But that's a big ask for most people to take the time to buy a guppy bag, install it on your washer, et cetera, et cetera. So you can, the easiest solution there is then stick with single bio-based inputs, 100% cotton, 100% wool, 100% silk, and be looking for certifications through the supply chain for fair trade, fair labor, organic. But it's so convoluted, and there are a couple of different. I'm sure you've seen them. Groups. One's called Good on You, and there are a couple of new groups looking to start doing rating and ranking systems for brands. But it really does take time and take a little bit of energy to dive in to make sure that you're buying something that you can stand behind.
Yeah. I wish there was a magic wand that we could wave that would make it easy for
Yeah,
consumers. It comes down to homework.
it's getting a lot easier. But there are bigger brands that have built their business saying that they're transparent or sustainable. But when you really dig into it, they're not,
Yep.
or not, haven't done as great of a job as they could have done. And then the problem with the word sustainable, if they're messaging a sustainable line, that can mean so many different things. That can mean sustainable, again, with sustainable factory relationships. That could mean sustainable, like 10% more sustainable. Um, that could mean like they've just changed one dye, but the rest of the fiber was the same input. Um, it's it's really difficult. So I think what we've indexed on telling our community to look for is really look at the fiber and learn to go for either organic cotton, recycled inputs, fair trade cotton, 100% bio-based if possible. If not bio-based, 100% recycled poly or recycled inputs. And then really thinking about the way that you're caring for your clothes to minimize micropollution.
And until the day that my clothing gets a kind of a nutrition label or like a components label, the way that food is supposed to have, yeah, it's the best you can do is just be like, okay, if it's only cotton, we're going with cotton. I'm not going to mess with this other stuff.
Yeah, totally.
All right, last question.
Okay.
So you're old and you're watching the sunset from a front porch rocking chair. What does success look like to you in retrospect?
I mean, Stuart and I, we've obviously had to confront this, not the sunset rocking chair
Mm.
portion of this question, but we've had to confront what does success look like, daily the last few months with everything changing. And
Yeah.
and again, it goes back to that anecdote I told you about us looking at each other and being like, what would we do next? And when we're so deep now, we'd probably do the same thing. And so success to us, really looks like, I think there would be two or threefold. One, it would be relationship and team. So Stuart and I are dating. and we've built such incredible relationships and met such amazing people from our earliest investors to our current team that, just having had the chance to work with these people has been unbelievable, especially at, where we are in our career right now. And so maintaining and continuing those relationships indefinitely would be the number one thing that we'd need to protect. And so that would be success, is if we, looking back, had built like this group and this team and this community that was really aligned and together. And as far as the business, I think our whenever we see a brand launch something that we think potentially was launched or had eyes on what we've been doing or on how we've been talking about sustainability, and we've seen that quite a few times now within the footwear space and with other brands, brands talking about launching take back programs, talking about recycling from day one. It's exciting because, I think even though we're still so new, 6, 7 months in, and we're still so early, people have noticed. And we've had some really bigger players reach out to partner with us early on. And because we're doing things so differently, I think we are pushing others to move quicker, where they didn't have to be as transparent, or they didn't have to focus on end of life as fast. I think we've expedited a few timelines. And that's really amazing, because that was the whole goal, was how do we make a change? And how it was that same thing my mentor told me: how do you move units? Go learn to move units if you want to make a change. And so on the business side and on the industry side, again, thousand fell is necessary for market development, because this is how we have to start designing. And then the third portion, it just has to tie back to that mission. We've spent a lot of time thinking about building a diverse team and diversifying our team even outside of New York. And how can we stand for this next generation of sustainability if we're not speaking directly to these younger, youth-led diverse communities around the country? And so, for us, for both Stuart and I, that is so important, especially because sustainable activism was so important to me when I was 13 to 17. And so continuing to build that community and making a difference there in some of these communities we're going to work with this next year, that'll really be a defining moment for us in success.
In sitting with what Chloe and Stuart shared, a few things started to stand out to me. Most of all, though, I found myself inspired by the way they consistently value others. Think about it, right? There was hardly any facet of their work which, when we talked about it, didn't include a mention of a mentor, a co-conspirator, consideration for who would be affected downstream, or which wasn't permeated by a real sense of stewardship. No pun intended. Their website is thousandfell.com, and this show is definitely not about product placements or ads, so hear me when I say this. If you are looking for shoes, please buy their shoes. Credits this episode go to Hazel Shin, Brian Nickerson, Jessica Solash, Chloe Songer, and Stuart Olam of Thousand Fell, and you for listening. I'm Natalie, and I'm out. Till next time, gang.